Hi everyone, today we're going to cover when using a sprayer on our masonry stains. So first I'm going to go over to the product. This is our masonry stain in a white color. You'll notice it looks like a rock-like structure. And then here is our primer. This is our Eco-Prim. If you apply our primer and leave it on the surface like a glass overnight, what you're going to get is the product is going to silicify. So air meets carbon dioxide, the liquid starts to evaporate, and slowly it turns into like this type of a structure, for example. So when you're using a sprayer, you're most often going to be used to using regular paints, latex acrylic. Those have been synthesized and they really don't contain these types of minerals. So they will not harden like our products. So let's start with the first little sprayer. If you're simply using our Eco-Prim, you could use something as small as a cheap pump sprayer. And so here's the thing, when the air meets the liquid as it comes out, or CO2 then is in transition, if there's any back pressure that goes in, at some point these areas are going to start to harden if you leave the product in there long enough, right? So like this type of container, if you were to use on 200-300 square feet of surface, if you're going to use the Eco-Prim and then adjust the pressure here so it's not all over, you want to clean this with water when you're done and then do a couple sprays, so then the water glass is not going to stay on the inner tube and everything else because it'll harden. So you want to use the same sequence if you're using like a Graco 595 or higher for the same purpose. Once CO2 and air is met, all the liquid, if there's any air back pressure going in, it's going to harden the hose and the tip. So the tip should be cleaned. I would recommend once a day if you're going to take a lunch break or a break, and then even the hose, have it cleaned out, and then when you resume like 30-40 minutes later, you're kind of working with a new sprayer or a clean sprayer again. And that same thing goes for that 60 mesh filter. And again, it goes back to, it's not the thickness of the product, it's that it contains minerals. And as they harden with the CO2, for instance, in the air, then it's going to turn into a rock-like structure. Now, you're not going to see this when you are using the sprayer, but overnight, once the liquid starts to evaporate or once it's on the vertical wall, it starts to cure like in this sequence. So if you leave our container, say this is the lid, you leave it open for 3-4 days, the stain is going to get thicker and thicker to the point where it turns to a rock. So it's not about the PSI by itself. It's not just the 2900 PSI, because I believe I think it's the XC21 is very not far off from the Graco 595. But what's really required is how much is the machine yielding per minute. So it's kind of like you have a V6 and a V8 or a 4-cylinder. Maybe the RPMs are within a similar frame, but it starts to, one is going to get you a lot more performance, right? So you want to think about, when I'm using the sprayer, how much is it pumping out per minute is really what it comes down to. And I get these questions all the time. So if you're using like a little Wagner, you may get 50 square feet out of it, but then it's just going to start to clog up, because if it's yielding less per minute, once the CO2 again is met, it's going to start to cure, most likely on the tip over time. The other questions that I get is, why does it have to be a 519 tip? Can it be smaller? That's what we used when we were doing testings. Tips smaller than that could clog up, again, the process. So as a safety measure, if you're going to begin a project, you really don't want to have it stopped halfway. You got the bucket already made, you got the sprayer, and now you have an issue on your hands. And let's say you got a wall that you just sprayed, and now you got to start back rolling. So best practice is to keep the tip as clean as possible. Probably clean it a couple times a day when you're doing breaks, including the hose. And then the mesh filter most likely is going to have to be cleaned. When using a thinner, which is our fixative and our Eco-Prim, you could use even one of these types of sprayers, $8-10 sprayer. But when you're done, same thing, clean it out. Make sure that this is properly clean. You could use regular water and soap. That's really all you need to clean. And then you should be good to go. But that's pretty much why we have a minimum sprayer, which is going to be like a Graco 595 or a Titan. I believe it's going to be 640, is because the machine is going to yield that much more per minute. It's not only the PSIs. So hopefully this helps a little bit of an overview as far as what to use when you want to use a sprayer and what to look out for. Thank you so much for attending this video. Should you have any other information, our direct email is info@mineralstains.com.